The massive alien ship appeared without warning, materializing just beyond Earth's moon. Its dark surface absorbed light rather than reflected it, making it look like a hole in space. Military satellites across the globe turned their sensors toward the vessel, which was larger than any human spacecraft ever built. Inside the United Earth Defense Council's underground headquarters in Geneva, Admiral White stood before the massive wall screen, his weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lights. Around him, military officers from every major nation watched in tense silence as more ships emerged from whatever space they had traveled through. "Sir," a young officer called out, "they're broadcasting on all frequencies." Admiral White nodded, his gray hair catching the light. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a figure appeared that made several officers step back. The alien commander looked almost human, but wrong in subtle ways. Its skin was metallic silver, its eyes solid black, and its movements too smooth to be natural. "People of Earth," the being spoke in perfect English, its voice carrying an artificial resonance. "I am Commander Stone of the Endless. We have come to accept your surrender." Admiral White straightened his uniform. "This is Admiral White of the United Earth Defense Council. We did not offer surrender, nor do we intend to." The alien's face showed something like amusement. "You misunderstand. We are not requesting. We are informing. We are the Endless. We cannot die. We cannot be defeated. We have conquered 1,000 galaxies over 1,000,000 years. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your strategies cannot stop us. Your only choice is how many of your people die before you accept the inevitable." To demonstrate, Commander Stone raised a weapon to his own head and fired. His skull exploded in a spray of silver liquid, but before anyone could react, the liquid flowed back together, reforming his head perfectly. He hadn't even paused speaking. "As you see, Admiral, even death holds no power over us. We have evolved beyond such mortal concerns." The council chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Admiral White remained silent, studying the alien. Finally, he spoke. "And what would surrender mean for humanity? You would join our empire as a protectorate species. We would uplift you, guide you, protect you. In return, you would serve. It is a generous offer. Most species face extinction instead." Admiral White's response was immediate. "No." Commander Stone's perfect face showed the first hint of real emotion. Surprise. "You would choose death over perfection. We would choose freedom over slavery," Admiral White replied. "Humanity doesn't bow to threats, no matter how powerful the one making them." "Freedom?" Stone laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You are already slaves, to time, to decay, to death itself. We offer liberation from these chains." The Admiral's voice remained steady. "Those chains, as you call them, are what make us human. They drive us to create, to grow, to achieve. We'll take our imperfect freedom over your perfect slavery any day." Commander Stone's face hardened. "Then you choose extinction. We will begin with your major cities. You have 6 hours to reconsider. After that, we will demonstrate why we are called the Endless." The transmission cut off. Admiral White turned to his officers. "Send word to all military commands. Full mobilization. Get our orbital defenses online. And someone find me everything we know about these Endless." As the council chamber burst into activity, White walked to the window overlooking the city of Geneva. Snow was falling, the flakes catching the morning sun. He wondered how many more sunrises humanity would see. But unknown to him, in a remote research facility deep in the Rocky Mountains, a scientist named Dr. Miller watched the same transmission with growing interest. As others saw humanity's doom in the aliens' immortality, he saw something else, a flaw in their perfection, a crack in their eternal armor. He began typing rapidly on his computer, decades of research suddenly clicking into place. The Endless had made a crucial mistake in their arrogance. They had revealed too much. Now he just needed time to prove his theory before humanity paid the price for their defiance. The first attack came exactly 6 hours after Commander Stone's ultimatum. The Endless didn't bother with warnings or surgical strikes. They simply appeared in the skies above New York, their ships casting massive shadows over the city. Earth's defensive systems activated immediately. Surface-to-air missiles streaked upward, accompanied by energy beams from orbital defense platforms. The attacks hit their targets perfectly and did absolutely nothing. The Endless ships absorbed every impact without showing a single scratch. Then they returned fire. Their weapons weren't designed to destroy buildings or infrastructure. Instead, streams of silver liquid, similar to what Commander Stone's body was made of, rained down on the city. Wherever it touched, it began to change things, converting matter into more of itself. Buildings, vehicles, and even plant life slowly turned metallic silver. Admiral White watched the live feeds from the command center, his fists clenched. Status report. Sir, our weapons are having no effect. An officer reported. Nuclear deterrent is ready, but we'd only be destroying our own cities. White finished. They'd just regenerate. Similar attacks began across the globe. London, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing. Each city faced the same silver rain, the same unstoppable transformation. Conventional weapons proved useless. Even experimental plasma weapons and railguns couldn't stop the endless soldiers who walked through the streets, their liquid metal bodies flowing around obstacles and through defenses. In his Rocky Mountain facility, Dr. Miller watched the footage carefully. He paid special attention to how the Endless reformed after being hit, how their liquid metal bodies moved and repaired themselves. Each time they regenerated, he noted subtle patterns, almost like ripples in their perfect surface. Record everything, he told his small team. Every regeneration, every transformation. There's a pattern here, something they don't want us to see. The battles, if they could even be called that, continued for 3 days. Human military forces fought bravely, but it was like fighting against the tide. You couldn't kill something that simply reformed itself. You couldn't stop an enemy that treated fatal wounds as minor inconveniences. Dr. Miller, one of his assistants, called out, "You need to see this." The scientist walked over to a screen showing slowed-down footage of an endless soldier reforming after being hit by a tank shell. Frame by frame, the silver liquid pulled itself back together. There, Miller pointed. See that hesitation? That microsecond delay before the final reconstruction. That shouldn't happen in a perfect system. Before he could explain further, alarms blared through the facility. The Endless had found them. Miller quickly began transferring his research data to secure servers. Get everything backed up. We can't lose this data. It's the key to beating them. The facility's defensive systems activated, but like everywhere else, they proved useless. Silver liquid began seeping through the ventilation systems, spreading across the floors and walls. "Everyone out," Miller shouted, grabbing his main research drive. "Head for the emergency bunker." As they ran through the corridors, Miller saw an endless soldier step through a wall, as if it were water. The alien's black eyes fixed on him, and its liquid metal face formed into a smile. "Your resistance is impressive," it said, "but ultimately futile. Why do you continue to fight when you cannot win?" Miller backed away, keeping the research drive hidden behind his back. "Because that's what humans do. We fight impossible odds. We solve impossible problems. And sometimes," he pressed a button on the wall, causing emergency blast doors to slam down between them, "we surprise you." He knew the doors wouldn't hold for long, but he only needed a few minutes to reach the bunker. As he ran, his mind raced through calculations and theories. The Endless weren't as perfect as they claimed. Their regeneration had flaws, tiny ones, but they were there. And where there were flaws, there was hope. In the command center, Admiral White received word of another city falling to the silver tide. He stood at the window, watching Geneva slowly turn silver under the alien rain. But he didn't order a retreat. As long as one human still fought, Earth wasn't defeated. And somewhere out there, someone would find a way to stop these immortal invaders. They had to. 3 weeks after the initial invasion, Dr. Miller finally got his chance to meet Admiral White. The meeting took place in an underground bunker near what used to be Denver, one of the few major command centers still free from the silver plague of the Endless. Miller carried a single briefcase containing 20 years of research and 3 weeks of desperate analysis. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes tired from endless hours of studying footage of the Endless regenerating. But there was energy in his steps as guards led him to the command center. Admiral White looked older than in the broadcasts, the weight of Earth's defeats visible in the new lines on his face. He stood at a table covered in tactical displays showing silver zones, areas lost to the Endless. "Dr. Miller," White said, "I'm told you have something important to share. Make it quick. We're losing ground every hour." Miller opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. "Sir, the Endless aren't truly immortal. They're lying. To us, and possibly to themselves." The Admiral's tired eyes sharpened. "Explain." Miller played a slowed-down video of an Endless soldier regenerating after being hit by a plasma blast. "Watch carefully. See these patterns." He pointed to ripples in the liquid metal. "These aren't random. They're nanobots reconstructing their form. Incredibly advanced, yes, but still machines. Not magic, not immortality. Just very sophisticated technology." "How does this help us?" White asked. "We still can't stop them from regenerating." Miller smiled for the first time in weeks. "Actually, we can, because I've spent 20 years studying something they never considered important, the fundamental limits of information preservation." He switched to a different display, showing complex equations. Every time they regenerate, these nanobots have to perfectly reconstruct their entire body, including their memories and consciousness. They need perfect information transfer, down to the quantum level. "But that's impossible." White frowned. "Why impossible?" "Because of quantum mechanics," Miller explained, keeping his language simple. "You can't copy quantum information perfectly. There's always some loss. It's a basic law of physics. Each time they regenerate, there should be tiny errors, microscopic mistakes that add up over time." He showed another video, this one from the attack on his facility. "Look here. When this soldier reforms, there's a millisecond delay. Their regeneration is getting slower. They've been using this technology for millions of years, dying and regenerating countless times. The errors should have grown huge by now, unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless they're regularly replacing their entire nanobot system with fresh ones," Miller said. "I think they have facilities, probably on their main ships, that manufacture new nanobots. They're not immortal. They're just really good at replacing worn-out parts." White stood straighter, hope showing in his eyes for the first time in weeks. "How can we use this?" Miller pulled out a small device from his briefcase. "This is a prototype. It generates a specific quantum field that interferes with their nanobots' ability to maintain perfect information. Each time they regenerate under its influence, the errors get worse. Eventually, their regeneration fails completely." "You've tested this?" "On samples of their liquid metal, yes. We collected some from New York before it fell. It works, sir. We can beat them. We just need to mass-produce these devices." And an alarm blared through the bunker. A soldier burst into the room. "Sir, Endless forces detected approaching from the north." White grabbed the prototype device. "How long until they reach us?" 20 minutes, sir." The Admiral turned to Miller. "Is this thing ready for a field test?" Miller nodded slowly. "Yes, but we only have one. If we lose it..." "If we lose this bunker, it won't matter anyway," White said. He pressed a button on his comm. "This is Admiral White. All forces prepare for defensive action. And get me Captain Rogers. I have a special mission for his team." As alarms continued to sound and soldiers rushed to their positions, Miller packed up his research. He had spent 20 years studying the nature of consciousness and information, never knowing his work would become humanity's last hope. Now it was time to see if theory could become humanity's salvation. The ground shook as the first endless weapons struck the bunker's outer defenses. The final test of Miller's device was about to begin. Captain Rogers and his team moved through the bunker's dark corridors, carrying Miller's prototype device in a reinforced case. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew louder as the Endless pressed their attack against the outer defenses. "How exactly does this thing work, Doc?" Rogers asked as they reached the testing chamber. He was a practical man, more interested in results than theory. Miller carefully opened the case, revealing a device about the size of a small microwave. "Think of it like throwing sand into a perfect machine," he explained, connecting power cables. The Endless nanobots work by maintaining perfect copies of themselves. This device creates quantum interference, like static in their signal. The chamber itself was heavily reinforced, with thick walls designed to contain explosions from weapons testing. In the center was a clear containment cell, currently holding their test subject, a sphere of captured Endless liquid metal, constantly swirling and trying to form shapes. "Start recording," Miller ordered as he activated the device. A low hum filled the room, barely audible but making everyone's teeth tingle. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The liquid metal continued its restless movement. Then, slowly, its motion became less smooth. Small ripples appeared on its surface, like waves in a pond. "It's working," Miller whispered, checking readings on his tablet. "The quantum interference is building up. Their nanobots can't maintain perfect regeneration under these conditions." A soldier burst into the room. "Sir, the outer defenses are breached. Endless forces are inside the bunker." Rogers turned to his team. "Defensive positions. Nothing gets in here until the test is complete." The sounds of fighting grew closer. The distinctive liquid swish of Endless soldiers moving through walls and floors echoed through the corridors. Rogers' team set up at the chamber entrance, weapons ready despite knowing they would do little good. In the containment cell, the changes became more dramatic. The liquid metal's movements grew jerky, uncoordinated. Shapes it tried to form collapsed back into formless puddles. Parts of its surface began to dull, losing their mirror-like shine. "The errors are cascading," Miller explained, excitement breaking through his professional calm. "Each failed regeneration attempt makes the next one worse. The nanobots can't cope with the information loss." An explosion rocked the chamber. Through the smoke, an Endless soldier stepped into the room, its liquid metal body flowing around the debris. Rogers' team opened fire, their bullets passing through the alien's fluid form. The Endless soldier reformed, but Miller noticed something. Its regeneration took slightly longer than usual. The quantum interference was affecting it too, even at this distance. "Keep it busy," Miller shouted, adjusting the device's settings. "I need to increase the power." The liquid metal in the containment cell was now barely moving. Its surface had become grainy, like wet sand instead of liquid mercury. Suddenly, it stopped moving entirely. The shiny surface turned dull gray, then began to crumble like ash. The Endless soldier, seeing this, showed the first sign of emotion Miller had ever witnessed from their kind: fear. Its perfect face twisted in an expression of horror. "Impossible," it said, its voice distorting. "We are eternal. We cannot." The soldier's regeneration slowed visibly. When Rogers' next burst of bullets hit it, the holes took longer to close. The alien stumbled, its liquid metal form becoming sluggish. "Fall back," Miller yelled, grabbing the device. "The effect is spreading. We need to get this data to Admiral White." As they retreated through the back exit, Miller looked over his shoulder. The Endless soldier was on its knees, its perfect silver form now patchy and dull. For the first time in millions of years, one of the immortal Endless faced something it had forgotten how to handle: the possibility of true death. In Miller's hands, the prototype hummed steadily, proof that humanity had found a way to fight back. Now they just needed to survive long enough to build more. The captured Endless soldiers sat in a specially designed containment chamber, its liquid metal form constantly shifting like quicksilver. 3 days had passed since the successful prototype test, and now the full interrogation would begin. Admiral White, Dr. Miller, and Captain Rogers watched from behind thick observation glass. "Begin recording," Miller said, activating the improved version of his device, now officially named the Entropy Accelerator. Test subject shows normal regenerative capabilities. Beginning exposure at 10% power. The soldier's smooth silver face turned toward them. "Your attempts are meaningless. We cannot die. We cannot be stopped. We are beyond your understanding of life and death." Miller adjusted some controls. "That's where you're wrong. We understand death very well. It's you who have forgotten what it means." The Entropy Accelerator hummed to life. At first, the soldier showed no reaction. Then small ripples appeared across its surface, like rain on a pond. "Tell us about your regeneration facilities," Admiral White demanded. "Where do you get new nanobots when yours wear out?" The soldier's laugh was like breaking glass. "You think we would reveal our secrets? Your species will be." It stopped suddenly, looking down at its arm, where the liquid metal surface had become slightly grainy. "Interesting," Miller noted. "The degradation is starting sooner than in our previous tests, increasing power to 20%. The soldier tried to stand but stumbled. Its movements were becoming less fluid, more mechanical. What are you doing to us?" "Introducing entropy into your perfect system," Miller explained. "Every time you regenerate, the errors get worse. Your nanobots can't maintain their perfect copies anymore." For the first time, fear crept into the soldier's voice. "Stop this. You don't understand what you're doing. We had perfected immortality. We had conquered death itself." Rogers stepped closer to the glass. "No, you didn't conquer death. You just ran from it, hid behind your technology. But you can't run forever." The soldier's surface was now visibly degrading. When it moved, small flakes of dull gray metal fell from its body like dead skin. It tried to regenerate, to maintain its perfect form, but each attempt was worse than the last. 30% power, Miller announced. Subject showing significant breakdown in regenerative capabilities. "Wait," the soldier called out, its voice distorting. "The regeneration chambers, they're in our main ships, the central core. Without them, we... Admiral White leaned forward. "You what?" "We die," the soldier whispered, as if saying a long-forgotten word. "Really die. No regeneration. No coming back. Just ending." Its liquid metal body was barely moving now, more solid than fluid. The once perfect mirror surface was almost completely gray and rough. "Please," it begged, showing more emotion than any human had seen from the Endless. "We forgot what it was like to be mortal, to face true death. The fear. How did you live with this fear?" Miller's voice was gentle but firm. "We never forgot. That's what makes us human. Death gives life meaning. It drives us to achieve, to create, to leave something behind us greater than ourselves." The soldier's form began to crumble. "We thought we were gods," it said, its voice fading. "But you turned our perfection into our weakness. Perhaps we were wrong about humanity." Those were its last words. The liquid metal body collapsed entirely, turning into a pile of dull gray dust. Admiral White turned to Miller. "How soon can we mass-produce these devices?" "The prototypes are ready," Miller replied. "We can start immediately." "But sir, they'll know what we can do now. They'll adapt their tactics." "Let them," Rogers said, checking his weapon. "At least now they know what fear feels like." White nodded grimly. "Send word to all resistance forces. The real war begins now. And for the first time, we're fighting on equal terms." As they left the chamber, Miller looked back at the pile of gray dust. The Endless had forgotten what it meant to be mortal. Now humanity would remind them, one soldier at a time. 1 month after the successful test, humanity launched its first coordinated counterattack. Underground factories had worked day and night to produce thousands of entropy accelerators, while survivors from occupied cities formed resistance groups. The time had come to take back Earth. Dawn broke over the silver-coated ruins of New York. The Endless had transformed much of the city into their own image, buildings and streets now covered in liquid metal. They had grown comfortable, believing their victory was certain. That's when the attack began. Captain Rogers led the first wave, his team carrying backpack-mounted entropy accelerators. They moved through the streets silently, watching the liquid metal surfaces around them ripple with the presence of endless patrols. "Remember," Rogers whispered into his radio, "full power from the start. No mercy." They didn't show us any. The signal was given, a simple red flare in the morning sky. Across the city, hundreds of accelerators activated simultaneously. The effect was immediate and devastating. The liquid metal surfaces began to deteriorate. Endless soldiers emerged from walls and floors in panic, their perfect forms already showing signs of degradation. They tried to fight back, but their usual tactics of flowing through obstacles and regenerating from damage worked against them. Each movement, each regeneration, only accelerated their decay. High above the city, Admiral White watched from a stealth helicopter. "Status report," he demanded. "Sir, resistance forces report similar success in London, Tokyo, and Moscow," his aide reported. "The Endless are falling back. Their regeneration is failing faster than in our tests. The mass effect of multiple accelerators seems to be amplifying the quantum interference." The Endless tried new tactics. They attempted to overwhelm human positions with sheer numbers, hoping to destroy the accelerators before the degradation became terminal. But humanity had learned from months of defeat. Hidden bunkers protected the device operators. Automated drones carried accelerators into endless strongholds. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Dr. Miller monitored the global battle through dozens of screens. Data poured in from every front as the Endless faced mortality for the first time in millions of years. Some fought desperately, others tried to flee, a few simply stopped, accepting their fate with a strange sense of relief. Then the facility's alarms blared. Multiple Endless ships descending. An operator shouted, "They're targeting research centers and production facilities." Miller rushed to the main screen. Commander Stone's flagship had appeared above the mountains, its massive form blocking out the sun. Smaller ships surrounded it, launching waves of attacks. "They figured it out," Miller said. "They know we can't win without the accelerators." The facility shook as the first bombs hit. Endless soldiers began appearing inside, fighting through the defenders with desperate fury. But these weren't the confident immortals of before. These were creatures facing death for the first time, and their fear made them dangerous. "Protect the production lines," Miller ordered. "Everything else is expendable." He grabbed the latest prototype, a more powerful version of the accelerator designed to affect larger areas. As he ran through the corridors, he saw his own people fighting with a determination the Endless couldn't match. Humans had lived with death their entire lives. They knew how to face it, how to fight despite it, how to find meaning in its shadow. An explosion rocked the facility, collapsing part of the roof. Through the falling debris, Miller saw Commander Stone himself step into view. The Endless leader's perfect form showed signs of degradation, proof that the earlier battles had affected even him. "You," Stone said, his voice filled with something between rage and fear. "You did this to us. You made us remember death." Miller activated his prototype, watching the quantum interference pattern spread. "No," he replied calmly. "We just reminded you that you were never truly immortal. You only thought you were." Around them, the battle for Earth's future raged on. Humanity had found its weapon. Now they just had to survive long enough to use it. Commander Stone towered over Dr. Miller in the ruined facility, his liquid metal form casting strange shadows in the emergency lights. The prototype entropy accelerator hummed between them, its quantum field already causing ripples across Stone's surface. "You don't understand what you've done," Stone said, his perfect voice showing cracks of distortion. "We are civilization's peak. We conquered death itself. We are eternal." Miller stood his ground, adjusting the device's power. "No species can conquer death. It's not something to beat. It's something that gives life meaning. Your immortality made you stagnant, unchanging, while we evolved, grew, pushed forward. Above them, the battle rage." Admiral White's forces had surrounded the facility, their accelerators running at full power. The endless ships showed signs of degradation, their once perfect hulls becoming rough and grainy. Stone tried to attack, but his movements were sluggish. The liquid metal of his form wouldn't flow properly anymore. "We achieved perfection," he shouted, his voice breaking. "We couldn't die. We couldn't fail." "And that was your weakness," Miller replied calmly. "You stopped trying to be better, stopped learning, stopped growing. Did you create anything new in the last million years? Make any great discoveries? Write any songs? Or did you just exist, unchanging, while the universe moved on without you?" Through the broken ceiling, they could see Stone's flagship starting to crumble. The mighty vessel that had terrified humanity now looked old and tired, its surface falling apart like ancient rust. "Your regeneration chambers are failing," Miller continued. "Your nanobots are breaking down. You're experiencing something you forgot long ago. The pressure of time, the weight of mortality." Stone stumbled, parts of his form beginning to flake away. How do you bear it? Knowing each moment brings you closer to the end." "That's what makes each moment precious," Miller said. "We love because we know it won't last forever. We create because we want to leave something behind. We fight harder, think deeper, feel more intensely because we know our time is limited." Around them, the remaining endless soldiers were falling. Some simply collapsed into piles of gray dust. Others tried to flee, only to find their ships couldn't carry them to safety anymore. The quantum interference had spread too far, affected too many of their systems. Stone fell to his knees, his once mighty form now barely holding together. "We were wrong," he whispered. "About everything. About you. About ourselves." "It's not too late to learn," Miller offered. "Accept mortality. Join us as equals. Help us explore the galaxy not as immortal conquerors, but as fellow travelers facing the great unknown." But Stone shook his head, pieces of his face crumbling away. "We can't. We forgot how to change, how to grow, how to live." His voice became softer, almost peaceful. Perhaps this is what we were searching for all along. An ending. A true ending." With those words, Commander Stone, who had lived for millions of years, conquered thousands of worlds, and thought himself a god, crumbled into dust. Above the facility, the endless flagship broke apart, raining silver fragments that turned to gray ash before reaching the ground. Across the planet, the liquid metal covering cities and landscapes crumbled away, leaving Earth scared but free. Admiral White's voice crackled over the emergency channels. "All commands report. The Endless are retreating. Repeat, they're retreating from every theater." Miller looked at the pile of dust that had been Commander Stone. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon hadn't been the entropy accelerator. It had been their understanding and acceptance of mortality itself, their drive to achieve, to grow, to leave something meaningful behind. In the distance, the sun rose over the mountains. It was Earth's first dawn as a free world, and humanity's first step into a larger universe, not as immortal beings, but as something far more precious, mortals who had learned to make their limited time matter.